Club. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Book Talk with Kara. And I am so excited to introduce you to my friend, Julie Klassen. She writes some of the best Regency, Jane Austen-esque books. I might be a slight fan because I have just a few of her novels here, and there's a bunch more on my Kindle. So the thing about Kindles is I can't show your books. Like, I have this whole list of them in here. So Julie, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure. You've done a wonderful job already. I'm Julie Klassen. I just realized I had a count up today. I know you have, I don't know, many books, but today I'm getting ready to celebrate my 18th novel.
That's awesome.
How many do you have, Kara?
I think I'm at 36, but
yeah,
remember,
I knew yours was
a lot of my early ones were about half this size. So we're probably at about the same word count.
Okay. So, and I think a lot of people know, but I am a geek for the whole Jane Austen reading. I just realized all of my books are set in that England in the early 1800s. That's what gets me excited, and I love to watch all kinds of any kind of period dramas, or what I'm usually watching or reading for my own pleasure is usually something along those lines.
That is awesome. And what's so fun is not only have you been to England and you've done the research, you have created this time period. And I have to say, before your books, I wasn't necessarily a Jane Austen fan. I've since gone back and read a few of them, but I would say that for the most part, I was kind of like, oh, 18 teens, nothing fun happens then. And then I read Lady of Milkweed Manor, and it was absolutely fascinating to me because you found this really incredible piece of history and brought it to life around a story. And you had me because I'm a history minor. I love finding those books where I feel like I'm so engrossed in the story, but then I also have the opportunity to really learn something and feel like I've been there. How much research does it take for you to create this story world where we are just fully embedded in your characters and everything else?
A lot, because I live in Minnesota in the modern age. Before I wrote Lady of Milkweed Manor, I had never been to England. So yes, lots of research to this day, because you mentioned my first book where I was writing about a kind of a specific a woman who ends up being a wet nurse. That's a very specific type of thing to research, and then every book has had either some different profession. I find myself in like, what are you doing? You don't know about it. You don't know what it's like to be an apothecary, or all these odd, unusual to us professions. But that's what I kind of like about it, is doing the research. And I think if I'm fascinated by these little tidbits or the way things used to be done, maybe readers will too. So I'm still doing a lot of research. Thankfully, some of it, how fast carriages go, some of those slang things, some of those things I still remember, so I don't have to research everything, but there's always something new, a new setting to research, something like that. So I enjoy that part, thankfully. I was never really a nonfiction reader before I became a writer. I was always just reading fiction, but now I read a ton of nonfiction for research sake. So I like it.
That's awesome. And when we're done, you'll have to look at the comments, because all of these readers are like, I love her books. I've read them so many times. Jenny Snow says she loves it when enough years go by that she can go back and reread without remembering anything. But what's really fun is Nina chimed in and said Maid of Fairborn Hall was one of her favorites. And I remember this one and loved it. You've also had, like you talked about, The Apothecary's Daughter, The Silent Governess. That was such a fun twist. But the book that you have that's coming out next week it already feels like it's a multi-layered mystery. So some of your books have mysteries, some of them don't. How do you figure out what layers you're going to put in? Is it through your research that you find this thing that fascinates you, this aspect? Like, I'll never forget the goats serving as nursemaids. And that image has just always stuck with me. And it was so random that I'm like, it has to be real, because that's not something you just come up with. So how do you get your ideas for all the different stories and different twists and turns?
Great question. And I do think that's, for me, that's the fun part of this, that I have been asked, well, why do you just keep staying in the same era? But I do get to do a lot of different things within that, from those more historical, where you're taking a historical practice like wet nursing and the goats. That's my most commented upon historical fact. Were the goats nursing the babies with syphilis? Was that real? Yes. Yes. And that was and The Apothecary's Daughter was probably the hardest book to research, all the medical things and how they treated different ailments with different herbal combinations. And that was, well, they're all a challenge, but that one was a challenge too. But that's, I think, what keeps me interested, and hopefully readers interested as well, because it's not just the same, everyone is not just, I've had, they all have romance, they all have some family drama, they all have like touches of mystery, but within that, I can really take the time and just really focus on a romance. Like The Painter's Daughter was the marriage of convenience, which is fun to do, but I don't want to have to do one of those every time. And yes, I have had several that are more mystery related, like The Tutor's Daughter and Secret of Pembroke Park and The Bridge to Bell Island. And then this one is my most, whodunit, traditional murder mystery. And I think part of it is just for myself, like I want to have a little bit of variation for myself. So after I wrote the Ivy Hill series, which is a little bit more of a gentle country friendships and sweet romances, and that was, for three books and then a novella, then I wanted to get back and do a mystery, something a little bit more, a little bit, I don't want to say gritty in the wrong way, but a little more like what's going on, a little bit more suspenseful.
Yeah, well, and it's
variation. So that's, I think, I don't know that it's a big all the scheme. It's like, well, what do I feel like doing next? And within the same time period. So
well, and I know that when I write historical, it's always World War II. And for me, that's because the amount of research that goes into getting the setting and the details and the dialect and all of those things right, it takes a lot of work. And I've got shelves of research books, and I haven't written a new World War II in 8 years, but I'd love to again. I'm like, I'm not getting rid of those, because at some point, if I write again, I'm not going to be able to find these books and these resources. And there's a little bit of a love fest going on for The Apothecary's Daughter. I don't know why I'm not showing it. There we go. Everyone's like, this is my favorite. But what I love about The Shadow of Swanford Abbey is you've got a couple different things going on. It's a very Gothic feel, which you have layers of in a couple of your other novels, but there's this suspense element that, even though it's not fully fleshed out yet, because I just started reading it like an hour and a half ago, but can we wrap up this interview so I can get back to reading it? But there's so much going on from the very first chapter that I'm like, oh my gosh, there's just threads everywhere. So what was the hook? Was it the Abbey? Did you want to kind of pull in some of that Abbey history of England? Or what was it that made you go, this is going to be the hook for Shadows?
That's another wonderful question. I think it's, instead of one hook, it was lots of things. During the the lockdowns and things, my husband and I spent a lot more time listening to audiobooks and wanting to watch some things together. We were home more, we were together more, and we have very different tastes. And so trying to find something that we could both enjoy ended up being a lot of mysteries. So that was part of it, just that we were, bathed in, mysteries. I don't know whether we were driving to see family or, okay, let's sit down on one evening, let's watch something. What can we find to watch? So we ended up watching and listening to a lot of Agatha Christie, other authors and other mysteries as well. So that was part of it. Just this. I liked what my brain loves a puzzle. My dad was the champ of the New York Times crossword puzzles and Sudoku. I'm not as smart as he was, but I do love a puzzle. So that's part of it. Like, I wonder if I could do the closed room or the locked room mystery like Agatha does, obviously really well. I would kind of like to try that for myself. So I had the idea. And then, yes, we have been to to Laycock Abbey, a real abbey in England, a couple of times now. Both my group trips that I've hosted, we got to go there and visit. And so walking through those medieval cloisters, where the nuns used to pray, and just being around all that ancient history. And many of those historical religious buildings became private homes. You probably know Northanger Abbey, so Jane Austen has, they often became aristocrats' homes. And then some of them have also become hotels. Now, in real life, Laycock Abbey, that I've been to several times, is not a hotel. It became a private home, and now it's managed by the National Trust. But there are a couple of abbeys that you can go and stay at. If I get to go back to England, I really want to stay at one of them. But at least I could go online and visit the hotel and how they were able to, take the old chapel, and now they have, weddings there and that kind of thing. So I was able to visit those digitally or through Google. So that was really helped. And that atmosphere, yeah, I loved it. I just wanted to be there. I thought it just lent itself to me so well. I don't normally write ghost kind of stuff, but that atmosphere just lent it to, like, is there something going on? What's this figure? I really had a good time.
Well, and when you think about it, if it's an abbey, it's a spiritual location. So it just it fits. And I made a note so that when I get back to England, I can go and check it out, because I remember when I was writing Shadowed by Grace, and I wasn't able to go to Italy before I wrote it. But I knew these locations that were factually part of the journey of the Monuments Men, and spending all that time on Google. And I still haven't been, even though I've been 4 times to Italy with students, I haven't been able to go to Monte Gufuni, and it's still on my list, because after spending so much time on Google and Google Earth and all these places looking at it, I'm like, I have to go see it. It's amazing how much atmosphere you can get from looking at pictures, but it's still not quite the same as actually walking the grounds and all of that.
Right. Well, you feel my pain, because I'm trying to write, I have a deadline looming for my next book. My 2022 book is due to my publishers in January. So I'm writing, and it's a setting that I have not been to, and that's not my favorite. I'd much rather be able to go, but you can, as authors, there's thankfully so much more access to online pictures and websites, and I found some lovely people who work at the local museum who are helping me. So you can do it, but it's so much better if you can be there in person and smell the dusty smells and the shadows, see the shadows on the stone floors, or whatever it is great if you can be there. So I'm very grateful to have been to this abbey twice or 3 times.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and that's one of the things that, as I was starting the new book that comes out on December 7th, that I was remembering, one of the reasons I love your writing is it's so sensory. You really do place us in the middle of the location. So how do you do that? Because that's not easy as a writer. I was reading something else. I don't even remember. I've read so many books in the last couple of days that I'm like, I don't remember which one, but it was all dialogue and with just little bits of movement and setting, and it works. But then to switch to yours, and it's so evocative of all of the senses. So how do you go about making the decisions on what to layer in and what becomes too much?
And that is exactly what it is. It's layering in, because my first drafts are very dialogue heavy. I hear the voices first, and things like inner thought and even action, and some of those, certainly description, are way down on the list. So those are definitely layers, and it helped that I had been there. But I know it's a struggle for me. So I even went to I live near St. Paul, Minnesota, and there is a hotel there that used to be a convent, and it's 100+ years more modern. But I went because I felt I needed some more of those. What does it feel like to walk down these halls where, there used to be a religious home and there's religious symbols and paintings, but yet now it's a hotel, and it actually was quite helpful, even though it's modern. So yeah, I have to work on that. It doesn't come naturally, but and my editors are awesome about, okay, well, this is maybe a little too much, because what do they say? Overwrite, and then you can edit. And I have to when I finally work on description, I write whatever I can, and see what I like, and then my editors will let me know either that, okay, I can't see this specific setting. I don't know what a cloister is. I need more. Or they'll say, okay, we don't need 3 pages about the painting on the wall. Okay.
Yeah, well, and that's the challenge, because and everybody has a slightly different writing style. Mine tends to be kind of in the middle, but when I'm in the middle of writing something new, I often will have a note next to my monitor that says, don't forget to layer the senses, and to get beyond sight and smell or sight and hearing, because those are kind of the easy ones. But you even had in the description, kind of how it smelled like there might be something chalky in the
That was
air.
from the convent, because I could still smell the chalk, because it had been a school at some point.
Yeah, and I just thought that was such a great evocative moment, that I was like, ooh, it's not just a musty old building, but it's musty with a chalk smell. And so those kind of details really do help immerse us as readers, and then trusting our editors to help us figure out when to pull back, or when it needs more. So folks are definitely agreeing that those details, the immersion, all of that can be really great. And I think it's especially helpful when it's a setting we're not familiar with, or a time period we're not familiar with, to help embed us in that. So one question we have is, can you describe your writing process? So earlier in the comments, folks have talked about how they wait every December for your next book. And so they're eager for that next one to come out. But you just also mentioned that you're getting ready to turn in your next book, which might be really surprising to some people. So what's the writing process like? How do you actually form your story? And then kind of how many are you working on at the same time?
Well, I'm an underachiever compared to you. So currently I'm writing 1 book a year. And as you mentioned, they're pretty thick, but, and I have snuck in a novella here and there, but I'm basically doing 1 a year. But yes, publishing, as you know, is a very long process. At least my publisher, they want the first draft about a year in advance, a little give or take. So that there's time for them to give me feedback and for me to do rewrites. And then of course, all the editing and proofreading and all that, that comes later. So it is an interesting stress every November, December, because I'm excited about the book that's coming out. I want to talk about it. I want to do promotions for it, but I also have a deadline for the next book. So I have to do both. I have to juggle the writing and the promotions and the talking about. It's a lot more fun to have written
Yes.
a finished book, and it's still a lot of work to write, but you have to balance both, as you know. So it is about a year, and so I have been working on the 2020 book since the spring. I have to turn in a synopsis, and then summer is normally my write that ugly rough draft, just throw it down the page. I got a little behind this summer. I think we're all, with everything that's just going on and lingering, I got a little behind, so then I had to play catch up, but I like to hit deadlines. So I think I've caught up, and it's, I just met with my first reader last night. So I get a draft that I'm feeling pretty good about. I've read it several times. I give it to my first reader. Sometimes I'll have a second person read it, make more changes, and then turn it in January. And then there's the rewrites and all of that. So it is a long process, and nobody gets to see those ugly first drafts. But that gives me the freedom just to write. And then I know I'm a good editor. I did that for years, so I can fix it later. As you know, you can't edit a blank page. So
it is so true. And so one of the people who's watching, her daughter is sitting next to her taking notes because she's writing a fantasy novel. And I think that when it comes to people who are writing that first book, I think the statistics say something like 80% of people say they want to write a book, but a much smaller percentage actually do it. And it's because they get stuck on the blank page. And I haven't written a big book in the last year-ish. I've written a couple novellas, and because I haven't been in that consistent writing more days than not, every time I sit down, it's like, ugh. Okay, I got to get started again, because there's that kind of inertia you have to overcome. And it's just that kind of discipline of, okay, I'm going to write it. I know I can edit it. I haven't been a professional editor like you have, but I'm a pretty good writer because of my training as a lawyer. So I know that I can always make something better, but it's that getting started and that just kind of discipline. So are you a plotzer or a pantser?
First of all, I have to say, the fact that you can write novels and be a lawyer and a professor and a mom of all those kids, I mean, you do an amazing job, and you must be a really good writer to be able to do all of that. And you probably don't have as serious of heavy rewrites and all of that, because I'm sure because I'm just writing it as I go. I'm not, anyway, well done to you.
Thank you.
I'm not a complete pantser anymore. I mean, my first novel, because I had no idea if it would ever see the light of day, I had no contracts, that was, oh, this is fascinating, just starting writing and all of that. But now I have those lovely things called deadlines, which is wonderful. And I've
Great
had
motivation. Great motivation.
Yeah. And my publisher is wise enough to ask me to turn in what I'm planning to write. But turning in a couple of page description compared to a 400-page novel, there's a lot of room for details. So I'm somewhere in the middle. I've gotten a little bit better over the years of using different processes for developing characters and outlining the plot or the hero's journey, all those kinds of tools that we writers use. So I do go through those steps before I write, which helps, but there's always surprises and always changes and things I hadn't thought of, because what do you write in a description? Then they fall in love. Well, how? There's 40,000 different ways people can just start to fall in love or whatever it is. So I'm still developing. I don't have a process anybody's going to be asking me to patent anytime soon, but hopefully continually improving.
And that's what I love about writing. And your process works because we all love your books. But I think that's one of the things that really is wonderful about writing is it is a continual improvement process. We can always get better. There's always some aspect that we can push ourselves to go deeper or try a new technique or a new tool. But a couple of people are curious about how did you find your first reader and what do you expect a first reader to actually do?
My first reader is my really close girlfriend, and she read my very first novel when I was afraid to let anybody see it. So there's a trust and comfort there. She's not an editor, but she's a huge reader. And so she's very able to, she doesn't edit for me. She doesn't get into the grammar which I don't care about that. I'll get fixed later, but she's got a good grasp of saying, okay, I like this story, this romance is working, or this part is boring. I don't buy this subplot, or this character is not someone I want to spend time with, whatever. She's able to give me these kind of gut reactions to the big picture. Mm-hmm. And that is so helpful on those early drafts, because I'm not worried about the details at that point, but is the overall story working? And so, yeah, when we met over the next book, we talked about characters that could maybe go, and maybe we could do more with this character because they're more interesting. But I don't know, you don't always know when you're writing what's working and what characters people are going to love. Sometimes you have a clue, but you're not always sure. So I find that very, very helpful. And then over the years, I found other people, writer friends are great. Michelle Greep and Erica Vetch also write Regency, and we will bounce things off each other, brainstorm together. Michelle and I read our manuscripts more for the historical accuracy side of things. And that's super helpful. So there's different readers who help with different things. So it's not just one reader who's supposed to catch everything, because that would not happen. we all have different strengths. So it's helpful feedback.
It is. And I don't know about you, but I usually reach a point with the book where I'm like, I hate these characters. This story is stupid. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea to write it. And so giving it at that point to my editor or to a first reader, it can really be helpful to go, okay, this isn't total drivel. Someone's going to actually maybe like it and read it at some point, because sometimes we can just get too close to them, and writing can become work. There are days where it's fun and it's discovery, and then there are the days where it is a job. And so first readers, especially as I was starting to write, really helped me to feel like, okay, this story is working from a reader's perspective. Because like you said, you can always edit, you can always strengthen, but if a character is just fundamentally unlikable that you like because you know how they're supposed to be coming across, but it's not, then that's where first readers can just be absolutely helpful.
Agree.
So another question we have is, when you started writing, how did you overcome the fear of rejection in the process?
Was I supposed to have overcome that? I haven't.
I know. Yeah. I'm like, I've got a book sitting in front of two houses right now. And I'm like, are they going to buy it? Is it going to go anywhere?
A lot of authors like me don't even read our Amazon reviews because it's painful. I mean, 99 will be great and glowing, but they get one stinker and it just derails your creativity for a while. So it's, we all are supposed to get that thicker skin, but it is an ongoing, an ongoing challenge. So as Kara knows, I was in a different situation because I worked for a publishing house. So I had a little bit getting my foot in the door a little bit easier. Though that book was still, as you were asking me how that first one got published, and it was sent around with a pseudonym, but I was still very nervous for a few weeks when I knew my coworkers were reviewing Jane Kalen's novel and wondering if they were going to like it or if I was going to be really embarrassed when they learned who really wrote it. So I don't think that fear of rejection really goes away. You just do it anyway, and you got to keep. And when you publish the books, that doesn't necessarily go away. Not everybody's going to like every book. That's just the way it is. And or else we'd only need a couple authors if we all like the same stuff. So that's just something you have to just go on with it and accept that not everyone is going to give you a 5-star review, and that's okay. Keep writing.
And actually, those 2-star reviews actually give validity to the others, because it's like, okay, it's not just this love fest where it's just my friends posting reviews, but I've learned the hard way, because I always want to grow, that I'll look for a theme. And if I see a theme, like for a couple books, it was the heroine's just not as likable. For some reason, heroes I don't struggle with, but heroines I had to really work hard to go deeper, and I don't know why, but when it kept showing up, I was like, okay, this is something I need to legitimately work on. And so, but it takes a little thick skin to be able to read those and not just go, okay, I can't write, I'm done. So,
and I don't want to give the impression I don't want to learn. I do. I still take classes and all that, but my husband or my editor, they will read them for me, and then same thing. They will look for those commonalities.
Yep.
This book was too slow to get started. I hear that one. I have to work. That's something I have to work on, getting this story going quicker, because we all want to have this big setup and all the backstory. And I learned you can't do that. So I want to learn, but some of them can be a little painful.
Yeah, it's so true.
In the right frame of mind.
One of the organizations we're both in, Chi Libris, had, when we would do our retreats, they would have, the award for the worst review. And I won that one year, because my book was called A Fire Starter. And I was like, yeah. So, but we find ways to kind of celebrate the really bad reviews and keep moving, because it really is. I think it has to be that we know why we're writing and we love story. And so that's kind of what keeps us going, because rejection is hard. And Laura's like, I give you 5 stars, Julie. So and so there's lots of people who are like, it's just been fun to hear your writing process and all of that. So you don't write in chronological order.
Yes. Who told you that? That's true. Well, I don't. I write, if I have a really good idea, I think a really good idea for a scene, I write it, because I am a lot older than you and I don't want to forget it. I get a lot of my ideas, by motion. So if I'm walking or even in the car, I'll often, have these whole scenes come to me, and they don't play right. They don't say, okay, this is the next thing that has to happen. So I come home and I go to my computer and I write it down. And I feel like then later I have to weave them together in the right order. Would it be easier to write chronological? Yes, it would, but it's not how the ideas come to me. So.
Yeah, and I'm much more chronological, but Trisha Goyer let me kind of sit in the back seat as she was writing her Civil War series, the Spanish Civil War series. And she did that. It was a scene here and a scene there. And I was like, how can you do this? I'm still a lawyer, where everything's got to be logical and in order. But I have found that when I get stuck with a book, sometimes one way I get unstuck is to jump ahead to a scene I can picture. And then the software is so great that then you can just slide it into place where it fits later. And so, you just kind of learn those tricks and what works for you. But I am much more sequential. 90 of the time. The idea of just having all those scenes makes me.
I think I would like to be you when I grow up.
Yeah, I know. And I would like to be you and win all the awards and all that.
That's not how it works. But do you use Scrivener?
Scrivener, I can't write in. It's the craziest thing. I use Scrivener for capturing my notes and my character summaries and stuff like that. But then I write in the Quill IO online, and it's Scrivener online. And I can totally write. My last like 6 or 7 books, maybe 9, have all been in that. And so I find it hilarious that Scrivener I freeze, but the online version, no problem. I can write.
Interesting. When you mentioned, I do like it for the moving scenes around and being able to keep all your track of all your research.
Yeah. And that's what I can do on the Quill. But what I love about the Quill is because it's cloud-based. If I have 20 minutes over lunch to write when I'm at work, I can pull it up and I can write a scene. And then when I get home, I can pick it up. So I don't have to carry my laptop with me everywhere. I can write on any computer that has internet access, and it's all just there.
Nice.
So, yeah, so it works. All right. Well, we have gone over time because this has been so much fun. For those of you who are listening and tuning in, The Shadows of Swanford Abbey releases on December 7th, and it's got me hooked, completely hooked. Yeah, and it's a beautiful cover, but the suspense, that complaint you got about slow starts, this one does not have a slow start. It immediately pulled me in and sucked me in. And so if you're looking for a Regency author to try, I highly recommend Julie Klassen's books. I've never been disappointed. They're all good, unique, and fresh. And so I really think you would love her books. And like Julie said earlier, you may not love my books, but I will help you find an author that you will enjoy. So thanks so much for joining me, Julie. It was so good to get to see you.
It was great. And you're right. It went just like that. We could have talked for another hour, but it was very, very pleasant. You do a great job. So thank you for inviting me, for doing this. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So tune back next week when I will have my